Hi everyone, I'm Kat and I'm the Outreach Coordinator at Ontario Streams. Ontario Streams is a charity that is trying to fix up all of our local rivers and wetlands here in Ontario. In Ontario, we are very lucky to live right near the Great Lakes. They are the largest freshwater system in the whole world. This fresh water is essential for humans and all living things. Today we are going to be talking about one of those living things, and that is Atlantic salmon. They are one of over 150 different kinds of fish that we find here in the Great Lakes. Atlantic salmon are considered locally extinct or extirpated, which means that they used to live here in our Great Lakes. However, they don't live here anymore. Many of us, though, of course, have eaten Atlantic salmon, so they are not totally extinct like the dinosaurs, just locally extinct. So there's still lots of Atlantic salmon in the Atlantic Ocean. However, the population here in Lake Ontario have been considered locally extinct for over 100 years due to overfishing and the development of dams. Atlantic salmon in Ontario like to live in cold and clean water with no barriers such as dams. Atlantic salmon go through many changes in their life cycle as they go from an egg to an adult. When we think about humans, when we are babies, we just look like teeny tiny humans. However, with different animals, things like frogs, butterflies, and Atlantic salmon, they look different than their adult form. As an egg, Atlantic salmon are bright orange and about the size of a green pea. We can also see that in this stage, they are starting to develop their eyes, which are those little black dots. It will take about 8 weeks for this egg to hatch, and all of that depends on the temperature of the water. Once those eggs hatch, we call them alevin, and alevin are about 1 centimeter long. And they are very small, of course. And as a baby, they are very scared of things like being eaten by other bigger fish. Because these alevin are so small and so scared, and they don't have adults like we do to keep them safe or feed them, they hatch with basically a built-in fridge. This is called a yolk sac, and it has all of the nutrients that these little fish need to get them through the first 6 months or so of their lives. This way, they can just hide in the gravel and eat all of these nutrients in their built-in fridge until they are big enough to go off and catch their own food. Once they fully absorb that yolk sac, we call the little baby salmon a fry, kind of like a French fry, about the same size as a skinny little French fry, about 1 inch long or so. And at this point, they can go find their own food. They're a little stronger, a little bit bigger. They're ready to see the world. So they will start to find little pieces of life, things like insects in the water, bugs in the water, and they will start to eat lots of those things and start to grow. As they keep growing, they start to develop some new colors and patterns on them, and at that point we will call them a parr. Here is when they start to develop a lot of camouflage so that they can hide better in their rivers. They will continue to keep catching their own food, and they will keep growing until we get to a stage called the smolt. And the smolt is like the teenager of the salmon world. This is the point where they will begin their migration. A migration is that big journey that some animals make. We think about things like birds and butterflies who fly south in the winter to stay warm and get away from our cold Canadian winters. But in this case, the salmon are now looking for more food. So they will go from these freshwater rivers out to a bigger body of water. So the salmon that live near the oceans will swim all the way out to the oceans. However, the salmon that we have here in Ontario, they will swim out to Lake Ontario, and that will be their ocean, where it's full of lots of more food for them to eat and keep growing. Once the Atlantic salmon have reached their full size, the adults will swim back to the freshwater rivers where they started their lives And that's where the adults will start their family and begin the life cycle all over again. There are lots of organizations like Ontario Streams working to bring back Atlantic salmon into Lake Ontario. Well, there are two major ways that Ontario Streams works to help our local salmon. One is through habitat restoration, and that means that we are trying to fix up our local rivers to make sure that they are really healthy so that the salmon that live in the rivers are healthy too. The second way that we work to help our Atlantic salmon here is through restocking efforts. And restocking means that we are helping put more baby Atlantic salmon into our local rivers. So by helping build these populations, we're now seeing these little babies slowly grow into adults, which can then have their own babies later in life. One way that we help build these salmon populations is through in-stream incubation. Basically, what we do is we put the little Atlantic salmon eggs into these white tubes and put those tubes into the river. This tube keeps them protected from any larger fish who might want to eat them, as well as protects them from any big changes in weather. Our in-stream incubation research is a lot like your classroom hatchery tanks. In both scenarios, the eggs are being protected. Just like the eggs in the classroom are in those little condos, the eggs in the river are in these tubes. Both are kept in clean, cooled, and clear water, right? That's what our salmon need to grow nice and big and healthy. In the river, the water is naturally moving, which brings in oxygen. And in the classroom tank, we have little bubblers to add oxygen. We use that chiller to keep the water cold, and we use a filter to clean the water in those tanks. We take those fish out of the tubes and release them right into the river, just like students are releasing the Atlantic salmon into the rivers in the spring. So both of these are great ways to help our local Atlantic salmon get a good head start on life during those 6 months when they are just so scared and so vulnerable. Now that we know more about Atlantic salmon, let's think about ways that we can help the nature around us. One thing we can do is our 5 R's. Maybe we've heard of 3 of those R's: reduce, reuse, recycle, but we've got 2 more to add as well. We have rethink, which is about thinking about the things that we do every day and think about whether those are good for the environment. If they're not so good for the environment, maybe we can think about some different things to do that are better. We also have refuse, which means to say no to those things that are not good for the environment. Maybe next time we go get some takeout for dinner and they try to give us a plastic fork or a plastic straw, we say no thank you, and we just wait until we get home and we use the cutlery that we already have. Another thing we can do is save water. The water that we have in our homes comes from our local environment, so we never want to take more than what we need. One thing we can do is to try and take a shorter shower. A shower should be no more than about 7 minutes. That should be plenty of time to get everything you need done and save that extra water for the environment. It's also very important not to litter, and I know all of us don't want to be a litter bug. And it's a great idea too if we're out for a walk with an adult and we see some garbage and it's safe, we can pick up that garbage and get it out of nature. Hopefully today you've learned a lot more about Atlantic salmon and how we can help them and how you can work with Ontario Streams to try and make the environment even better for everyone. So thank you all for tuning in, and I hope you continue to watch the rest of the series of these videos.